Welcome to #Wednesdays Weekly, a weekly information session in collaboration with the public sector and voluntary sector partners. Today's host is Helen Kelsall from Rochdale Boroughwide Housing. Over to you, Helen.
Hi everybody, lovely to see you all. I'm Helen Kelsall from Rochdale Boroughwide Housing. I'm just going to start sharing the screen in a minute and get my slideshow up. Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
You all okay? Okay, so I'm here today to talk about RBH's Community Fund, which is basically the pot of funding that Rochdale Boroughwide Housing has that we distribute through communities for community projects. So I'll get started without further ado. I'll just find me. There we go. So what I'm hoping to cover today is just a quick overview about our fund and information on who can apply, and also the types of projects that we fund, and some sort of hints and tips and things to think about when you're completing our online application form. So, overview of our fund. Our community grants are basically between £250 up to a maximum of £5,000. The big change for us in the last 12 months is that we've now gone on to an online application form. Previously it was a Word document that people filled in, but now it's actually an online application system. So there's a website that you click into, obviously, and the form and the guidance notes are all there. Applicants are limited to one project grant in any financial year. Obviously running from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. So a group can only apply once in a given year. And what we have is we have a members community funding panel, because RBH is a members organisation, and our members are made up of employees of RBH and tenants of RBH. And basically a group of those people form a panel, and it's that panel basically that makes the decisions on what projects are funded. And in 2021, I haven't got the dates at the moment, but in 2021 we're going to be holding 4 panels throughout the year, and the first of those will be on the 13th of January, and the closing date for applications to that panel is actually going to be the 21st of December this year, because obviously Christmas is right in the middle of that. So we're going to say to people, please get your form in before Christmas, because no one wants to do that first thing in the new year. So our first panel will be the 13th of January, and then there'll be panels probably in May, September, and sort of through the year. So there'll be 4 more panels, and we will advertise the dates of those with Action Together as they are set. Okay. Don't know whether I jump forward one then. Who can apply? Yeah. So basically, the focus of our funding is on smaller groups and smaller charities and what community interest companies. So you have to be one of those 3. You either have to be an unincorporated association, or a registered charity, or a CIC, and your turnover has to be less than £150,000 in the previous financial year. And the idea of that was, it was very much that our fund is there to encourage smaller community projects to apply. Obviously that does mean that we're not able to offer funding to sort of bigger organisations and groups, so there'll be more appropriate funding that you would access if you were a bigger group. Also, we have a new rule now, which we didn't have before, because the panel reviewed our criteria last year, where if you've had funding from us, we basically ask you to take a 12-month gap before you apply again. And that's so that, you know, different groups can apply for the funding, and it spreads the funding out to different groups. The other rule we have as well is we do ask that groups have a bank account open in the name of the group. I know there are some funding pots available where perhaps a group's in just its startup mode and it can be supported, whether it's got a bank account opened or not. But we've got that sort of level. So for us, if you don't have a bank account open in the name of the group, we wouldn't be able to fund you at this stage. If we could help or assist you or signpost you to Action Together for support to get you to that stage so you could come to funding for us, then that's something that the team I work for, Community Investment, would do. But we do ask that groups have a bank account open in their name. And we've had one or two this year where they haven't. You know, on the online form there is a checklist of sort of eligibility criteria, so you kind of tick off, you know, yes we're a community group, yes we've got this, yes we've got that. And we do actually ask you to upload a copy of a recent bank statement when you submit your online application. And the final thing is that we ask that groups keep up-to-date financial records and that they're willing to provide monitoring information on their project. Okay. So the next thing is, what projects can RBH fund? So this is kind of the eligibility criteria for projects. So the biggest thing for us is that any project we fund has to clearly demonstrate a benefit to RBH customers or communities, and it has to be based entirely in the Rochdale Borough. Obviously that being Rochdale, Middleton, Harewood, Milnrow and Littleborough. At the moment, which is obviously something we're all wrestling with, all our projects have to meet the current COVID government guidelines around sort of safe practice. And we've had projects that have modified. We've had quite a lot of projects which have been very much about COVID response. We funded a project for Sandon House, which has been in Harewood, which has been supporting Harewood this year in providing food for people in the community in Harewood. Another example of a project we funded this year is a project where we're helping young people catch up with their schooling who are based in our local communities, so schools that are local to our neighbourhoods. And we've also got another project that's coming online, which is to do with supporting people to access a portal for information about healthy eating and cooking and financial inclusion. So there's different sorts of projects that we'll support. Also, your project can't have already started, and it must be completed within 2 years of you receiving your funding from us. And the final thing is, it has to deliver outcomes in one or more of the following areas, and I'll just go through these because they're quite substantial. This is quite a long list, and to be honest, you know, there's not that many types of projects where we would exclude you and say, well, that doesn't fit. But we do have some areas which are obviously very, very important in terms of supporting our communities. So the areas of benefit we've got are anything to do with work and skills. So helping people to access employment opportunities and updating their skills. Last year, we actually ran a project which was to do with well, it's actually the digital inclusion, but it was to get people online and learning new IT skills. We've supported a project which helped set up a workwear workshop and things like that. So digital inclusion is another one, which is helping people access and use digital technology. Obviously at the moment, especially with the situation with lockdown and COVID and people not being able to meet together, we've had quite a lot of applications this year already which are around digital inclusion ideas, because, you know, people can't meet face to face, and actually using technologies like Zoom and other technologies is becoming increasingly important. We support quite a lot of financial inclusion projects, so helping people to make their money go further. So a good example for us this year is we've supported 2 local pantry projects in Kirkholt and Smallbridge, which are in our communities. Last year we supported a project in the Lighthouse in Middleton, which helped with supporting a pantry project that's set up there. And pantries, for those who aren't already aware, are projects basically where they get food stock in from Fairshare and a community group runs. a project whereby people can do a shop of usually 10 items at a relatively low cost. It's usually about £3 a week, but the value of what they buy is a lot more than the £3 that they pay. So it's actually helping to make people's money go further. We also do fund a lot of health and wellbeing projects in various ways. It could be Keep Fit, walking club, gardening club, health drop-ins. I think we're going to see an uptick in sort of mental health support and wellbeing support projects as well. And we also look at projects that lessen social isolation, so things like mums and tots clubs, luncheon clubs. I mean, again, at the moment, we found this year with our applications, things that we've normally funded in the past, they haven't come forward this year because of the COVID restrictions. Some community groups are just kind of putting themselves in mothballs, and other community groups are doing their stuff in a different way. So the nature of the applications we've had this year has been quite different. And also then providing activities for children and young people. And as I mentioned before, we have supported sport and homework clubs in the past. And also at the moment we're supporting 2 separate projects that are providing sort of extra after school tuition and sort of homework clubs, for want of a better phrase, for young people in our neighbourhoods. We can also fund the projects that are around improving and developing green spaces, sort of, you know, things like, I don't know, community allotments, or, you know, we've had a project at Kew Gardens, which is in Kirkult, which was around creating raised beds so that local school children could come down and look after those raised beds and do sort of the educational work around that. And finally, we've got something that we call promoting mutuality across neighbourhoods. So that's projects that bring different communities and neighbourhoods together in promoting RBH's values. So those are the different sorts of projects that we tend to find come in and that we fund. So anything that kind of falls within that. And it is a pretty broad group. So I think if you look at it, there'd be very little that you probably wouldn't be able to fit into one or more of those categories as a project idea. So what project costs can the grant fund? Because there's lots of things, there are some things we don't fund, and there's a table here which basically goes through it. We will fund sort of sessional workers and sessional costs. We do fund room and venue hire up to £10 an hour. We can fund venue running costs that are specific to a project, and transport costs. Also hire or purchase of purchases for your project of things that you need. So we've had some IT projects where we might have bought some tablets or things like that. We will fund training costs and food and drink costs up to a maximum of £5 per head. And finally, sort of publicity materials for your projects, if that's a costed in item. What we can't fund is salaries, so we don't pay people directly, and we don't pay day-to-day running costs for a wider building, such as a community centre or something like that, or your council tax bill if you run a venue, and we don't pay for repairs and maintenance of routine repairs and maintenance or the purchase of vehicles or property. We can't pay for stuff that only benefits individuals, and we don't pay for alcohol, so the purchase of alcohol or debts and fines. I mean, this list, if we go through it, it's actually a fairly standard list, I think, of things that would be an exclusion for most projects. And also for us, we won't pay for things that have already been purchased. So if you've already bought something and you submit it as a cost, we wouldn't pay for that. Or the costs incurred when putting your application together. And someone actually queried that with me the other day, but the reason, I know there are some funders, usually bigger pots of funding, where they will look at the costs that you've incurred in putting your application together, but it's usually because it's actually quite a substantive amount of money that you're looking for, and there's actually been quite a big cost in putting your project together. Our projects are aimed a lot more at smaller community groups, so we don't cover that. And also we don't tend to do stuff that are one-off fun day type things. So if you're doing a coach trip, bouncy castle, face painting, things like that, we don't really fund that kind of thing. We do fund if you had a programme of activities through a summer, say. You know, if you had a one-off fun day, we probably wouldn't be the people that would fund it. But if you were running a club all through the summer holidays for young people that was doing different activities and bringing different partners in, which we did fund last year. We had a lovely group at Milnrow that were doing that. Then that was the Cray Junior Club. Then we would fund that. So that's the kind of feel of what we do and don't fund. I'm flying through here, aren't I? I'm going ever so quick. Okay, so the final bit of this before we get on to any questions anybody's got or any queries is completing the online applications, and it's hints and tips on that. And I apologise to anybody if this is stating the absolute obvious, but I'm going to go through them anyway. The first thing we'd say before you start on the online application is, please do read the guidance notes. So many people don't seem to read the guidance notes before they start, and then end up, you know, not really telling us what we need to know to help make the decision. The other thing is to, please, before you start, do have a look through the application questions. It's a pretty simple form. I might be able to bring it up after we finish this slideshow and just go into the website and show you. There are information boxes, not many, but 1 or 2 information boxes as well on our online form, which we'll look at in a minute, which can guide you the sorts of questions we'd like you to cover, which hopefully is helpful. Another hint for us is to have your paperwork ready before you start. So, you know, have your recent bank statement there in front of you, with your account details. You know, if you are a small community interest company or a charity, have your charity number or your CIC number ready. It just saves you a lot of grief as you're trying to get the form filled in. The other thing for us in terms of filling the form in is to try to make sure, one of the things we find a lot of our applicants fail on is they don't really tell us at all. It might be a lovely project idea, but they don't really tell us how they're going to make sure that RBH households and communities will be able to access the project. So that's difficult for us because that's one of the main criteria that we look at. We think, well, where is it based? Where is it going to be running from? How are they going to attract our households? Be they tenants or residents in our neighbourhoods, and our neighbourhoods are everywhere in Rochdale, you know. And that's one of the big things people fail on with us, is they don't really tell us that. And another thing people often slip up on is they don't really tell us how they've consulted or talked to people who live in our neighbourhoods about their project idea, and the feedback that they had, and whether people thought it was a good idea, so that there's buy-in. Because you can have a lovely project, but you kind of, if you haven't kind of road tested it, as it were, to show that people wanted that project, then it might be fantastic, but if there isn't any buy-in from the community, then it probably won't succeed as well as it could. So those are the 2 main things I would say, because we have had some projects where they've been, like I say, a lovely idea. We've had at least 1 this year, but where they were based wasn't really near any of our neighbourhoods, our communities, and there was no indication of how they were going to attract people to go to that venue to run that project. So it was declined. Another thing for us as well is there is a 500-word limit on the question, the main question, which is sort of tell us about your idea, your project idea. So we always say to people, please consider, you know, actually getting your answer scripted down in advance, so that you're not just typing it straight in, and that you've checked that you've covered the sort of questions that the types of questions that we like to see answered. And the final thing I think is that we do ask that people provide actual costings and not estimates. So if, like I said, the maximum grant is £5,000, sometimes people will round it up or whatever, and they'll go to quite high to the maximum level of the grant with their costings. But we like to see the costings. So if if something's sent in and there's no costings attached and they're very round figures, then probably me is going to come back and say, can we have some quotes on that? What are you basing that on? You know, if it's a piece of equipment, where's the information on it? Things like that. So we do ask that people provide the proper costings and not just a guesstimate of what they think it will cost. And I think that's pretty much it, just as a quick overview. I'm actually going to stop sharing this screen and go into the actual online form now. I hope this works. Please bear with me. Let's just have a go, make sure I'm not. I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm just going to go there. And, oops. There we are. Okay, so this is the actual online form. And there's a link in the final slide, which I'll go back to in a minute, which shows you the sort of website address. But if you type in RBH Community Funding, it'll take you here into any search engine. And as you can see, the guidance notes are there for everybody that you can download. And then, you know, the other thing about this is that once you've started, you can't save it and come back. I know there are some, I believe Awards for All is one, where you can save it and come back. With us, it's a one-hit wonder, so we haven't got the technology at the moment to for you to come back to it. So that's, as I said before, why it's important to make sure that you've kind of got your ducks in a row before you start with your answers, because you know, it will be just submitted. Once you press submit, it's gone, and you'll get an email from us telling you when the panel is and things like that. So, as I said before, it's pretty straightforward. It asks you all these eligibility questions first. You know, can you answer these as yes? You know, can you tick that these are true, that you can do these? And then it starts with the questions, which are pretty straightforward. Information, obviously, about your group, information about all your contacts, and then, you know, what sort of group you are. So it will prompt you, if you tick an unincorporated association, it will ask you certain questions, same with the registered charity, and then it will ask you to upload the bank statement. And obviously you can redact any financial information in that. It's literally just the account details and the name of the bank account. And then we start on the information about your project, you know, which are the headings, and it can be more than one heading that it falls under. And also then your estimated start and end dates, and what you think the cost is going to be, and also how much of a grant you're applying for, and if the total cost of your project is more than you're asking us for, which is a maximum of 5,000, where the rest of those funds are coming from. Because I know sometimes, you know, we've had one this year where somebody had a bigger project, we were part funding, and some funding fell through on the bigger part of the project, so that person's now come back and we're looking at how we can still run a viable project with a smaller amount of funds. And then we ask for a breakdown of all your costs, and then we ask for the 500 words to describe your project. Now just go into this little question mark here and it'll show you that sort of prompt that we have. So the sorts of questions we ask are, you know, what are your idea, what you're going to be doing, why is it necessary, how did you identify the need, when will it take place, is there a specific neighbourhood or community that it's going to benefit, who's going to be involved. So it's a whole list of questions, and it takes you through the process. So it asks you questions about, you know, how will you know your project's been successful, how will you measure your outcomes, and things like that. So hopefully those questions sort of prompt you to think about telling us a proper little story about your project, hopefully. I'll take that off. And then the final question is about the consultation, really, because as I said, RBH is a member organisation, so we do ask for feedback when you've been out in the community asking people about your project, you know, where's that project come from, have the community bought into it, and that's where we capture that information on that final question. And then we have some general questions around data protection. And then basically you submit your application. So that's basically how that works. What I'll do is I'll just bring the form back up again if I can. So really now I think that's me pretty much done. I think I've covered all my slides. I've just got to ask you, have anybody got any questions?